everybody. Is this working? Yes? All right. My name is Teresa Longo. I'm the executive director of the Reves Center, and you are in the Reves room of the Reves Center right now. I hope you've been here before. If this is your first time, please keep coming back. We have lots of events like this one regularly. For example, on Tuesday, we'll have students reading original stories they wrote while being in a country other than the U.S., or that they experienced in a country other than the U.S. and have written here in a workshop. Today, we have the pleasure and honor of having Professor Jess Pega with us and Maya Parfet. Jess and Maya are the people who did a Reves Faculty Fellows workshop. The Faculty Fellows program is something we offer here. It's a competitive program where professors ask for support from the Reves Center in order to do original research somewhere else with students. And Jess is a great friend to the Reves Center and also does amazing work, as you probably know. You maybe are here because you know Professor Pega and her expertise in classical studies and archaeology and history. I am delighted to be able to introduce them and to have them both here. Maya Parfet is the fortunate recipient of this work in Greece that happened as well and did really great work. And we're excited to hear from both Jess and from Maya. And you'll have time to ask questions before we close. Also, there's lunch. And if you would like to have the lunch before or during or after, that's all fine. We want you to feel very welcome here, and we're glad you're here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to talk with you all for about half an hour or so, and then we're going to have lots of good time for Q&A. If you need to pop out to get to class or something like that during the Q&A, that's absolutely fine. We'll stick around later than that if there's lingering questions. There's also a slide at the very end with our emails on it, so feel free to reach out to either of us, both of us, with any other questions or updates or things like that. We also brought a nice informational poster that you can take a look at over there that we put together that just details some of the basics of what we're going to be talking about today, which is the Naxos Quarry project. Before I start, I do want to extend my thanks. The NQP is a collaborative project. It could not happen without lots of institutional support here from the Reves Center, from William and Mary, from King's College London. Also, we are a collaborative project with the Ephoria of the Cyclades of the Greek islands. And so this is very much a project where we're working with local Greek archaeology service members, Greek archaeologists, members of the local community on the island of Naxos. So it's really, truly a team project. All right, so first I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about where Naxos is and when in time we are. So Naxos is the largest island in the Cyclades, which is this group of islands right in the middle of the Aegean. So you can see these are all of our Cycladic islands right here. Naxos is the largest one. The Cyclades are, from the Neolithic period on, a really interconnected area in Greece. So there's lots of interconnectivity, there's lots of conversation, dialogue happening between these different islands. Naxos is really prominent in what we call the Archaic period. So that's the 7th and the 6th centuries BCE. So this is when Naxos is really at the height of its power, the height of its influence in this particular period. And so we see a lot of exciting things happening on Naxos right in this period. You can also see from the image on the right that Naxos is an island with kind of unique topography. So on the western side of the island, we have a lot of sort of flat, low-lying coastal areas. Some areas are really marshy and swampy. But then in the inland and then over to the eastern side of the island, we get these really precipitous mountain ranges. And everything that you see shaded in that reddish color, that's all of the marble beds. Marble being what the island is made out of and what its primary export is. So to talk with you a little bit more about that, I'm going to pass it over to Maya here.
Yeah, so aside from its kind of unique topography and size, Naxos is set apart from the other islands in two ways. One of them is those distinctive marble beds that run through the island. So Naxos is known in antiquity and today for its coarse-grained white marble. But another really interesting thing about Naxos is that it's the only source of emery in the Aegean. And so what emery is an abrasive mineral that was really important for quarrying, polishing, grinding, cutting stone. So this was a really important export of Naxos during the Archaic period and really helped with sculpture. So this is an overhead view of the Apollonos Quarry, which is one of the ancient quarries on Naxos. But this is a drone video of a modern quarry on Naxos. So I think that it's really cool to look at these two things in conjunction with each other because we kind of see this continuity of resource extraction throughout time. But I think that looking at the modern marble quarry also kind of tells us a little bit about how these spaces are negative, they're extractive. And so that really impacts how we study them. So yeah. And then one thing about Naxos is that since it's so rich in these resources, marble and emery, we see a lot of Naxian sculpture popping up in different places in Greece. So there are a lot of colossal, really monumental dedications happening elsewhere that the Naxians kind of put their mark. And so there are a few examples on the next slide of some popular or famous examples of Naxian marble. So this is the Naxian Sphinx, which is from Delphi. That's the lion terrace on the neighboring island of Delos. This statue of a young maiden is from the Athenian Acropolis. And then this hand is also from Delos and would have been part of a much larger statue. And then this statue of a young man is from the Met Museum. So,
yeah. So as Maya said, one of the things that we struggled with the NQP was how to document these extractive, industrial ancient landscapes. So often when archaeologists are studying the past, we're looking at the finished products, right? So we're looking at the sculpture, we're looking at the temples, we're looking at these theaters, these beautiful things that are still standing or at least in ruins now. But a quarry is fundamentally different than that. It's fundamentally taking things out of the earth for other purposes. So we knew that we had to adapt our methodologies, our traditional approaches to how we would deal with these areas. So one of the things that we decided to do was to put together a really diverse and international team. So we have team members coming from 7 different countries, all with a really broad range of specialties, because no one of us singularly can do everything that we wanted to do. So we wanted to combine very traditional methodologies, so on-site examination, measuring things by hand, sketching things, drawing things, but to pair that with really innovative technologies. And so I'm going to walk you through a few of the different techniques that we've used so that you can get a sense of what all of the different team members brought to the table. But right here you see some of the things that Naxos is really famous for. So Maya mentioned these beautiful sculptures that were exported all over Greece, but we also have beautiful sculptures that were not exported because they broke. So we have these abandoned statues still in the quarry. So these two are exactly where they broke, in place. They were partially finished. They were on their way to a place like Delos or Delphi or Athens. And then this one's leg snapped off. This one also broke a leg. If you can see this massive one down here, he completely slid out of position before he was ready, and so they just abandoned him entirely. So we wanted to look at these aspects because this is where we can get a sense of how you do this, right? What are the processes behind quarrying, sculpture, architecture? How do you go from a mountain to a beautiful piece of art? So we started by really looking at these very well-known aspects, and then we deepened our investigation into 2 very prolific ancient quarries. So one of them, Melanese, right here, sort of in the inland of the island, and then the other one, Apollonas, up here on the north coast. And they were both a little bit different in the way that they look and in the way that they were being used. So this just gives you a sense of some of our sort of workflow. So the different things that we put into place to have the most robust, the most holistic documentation. And we specifically designed our workflow, which includes a bespoke digital catalog and things like that. But we designed it in order to be open access, in order to be adaptable and usable by anyone else who's studying quarries, anyone else who's studying industrial landscapes. And so the first step was to figure out what we were dealing with. And so we did that by mounting a LiDAR camera to a drone, flying it all around the quarries. And the great thing about LiDAR, which is a light penetrating radar, is that it can see through vegetation. And because these quarries are largely abandoned, they're pastoral, there is a lot of vegetation. Most of it very prickly, very uncomfortable to walk through. So before we go traipsing through a giant field, we want to know if there's anything there that's worth us looking at. And so the first step was to use the drones to get just a sense of what is underneath. So you can see some of the visualizations. They were really successful with this. We had a great drone team flying these around. Our big drone, we did have to get special permission from the Naxian airport, and we could only fly it during certain hours so that it wouldn't interfere with airspace. You know, once we had a better idea of what was out there, we employed some very traditional field walking techniques where it's exactly what it sounds like, a group of people walking through a field. But it's not just walking here and there. We divide the fields into griddable tracks with a cardinal direction. You stay in your track and walk forward in teams, documenting everything that you see on the ground in front of you. And so for us, that might be looking at unfinished pieces of sculpture and architecture, reused things like this column drum that's been recut, or just evidence for that quarrying. So up here you can see we've got a start of a column drum that never got completed. So every one of these things was photographed, was GIS tagged. We have a clear record of exactly its latitude and longitude, where it is. Very diagnostic or important things. We also used handheld scanners on iPads and iPhones to make photogrammetric models, so digital models that we can refer to later. We also looked at reuse. So this is a modern farmhouse that has lots and lots of reused bits of things in it. So the other real goal of NQP is not just thinking about the ancient quarries, but is thinking about how these industrial areas continue to be used over time, and the way that this ancient industrial activity impacts what's happening in the 18th century, what's happening in the 19th century, what's happening now in these areas. I keep trying to advance the slide with this. It's not working. Okay. So here we are at the Apollonas quarry. This is one where we actually had lots of evidence for that quarrying process. So in particular, we have a lot of evidence of the tool marks, the chisel marks, the splitting devices, the technologies that enabled them to get the marble up out of the ground. And so this also allows us to get kind of a better sense of who's doing this work. Very often when we study the past, we study the big names of the past. We study the names that we have in our written histories, the really important people, the kings, the tyrants, things like that. We don't usually study just the normal everyday people because they don't show up in most of our texts. But this is a place where they do show up because those are the people who are doing this work. So we can use things like quarry marks, tool marks, things like that, to think about how many people were involved in this job. Were these jobs that involved some degree of training? Are these skilled jobs? Are there unskilled jobs? Do we have a sense of the socioeconomic status of the people who are doing this. So these are things that our study enables us to ask questions about. And I think Maya might have a little bit more to say about that in a minute. We also did very traditional ceramic study, documenting all of the pieces of pottery that we could find. We have evidence for activity happening here from the Neolithic period up through the modern period. Sometimes it's really difficult to tell the difference, actually, between a Neolithic pot and a modern pot. They're using the same sorts of clay, the same sorts of shapes. A bowl is still a bowl, no matter what time period you're in. But we cataloged all of these, identified their morphology, their shape, their profiles, if they were used for cooking, if they were used for water carrying, things like that, to again get this more robust sense of who these people were who were working here. We also integrated some really great botanical study. So this is one of our team members, Thorsten Jacobich, documenting all of the botanical, ecological evidence within the quarries. So he found, for instance, this rare orchid. He was very excited when he found it. It, blew up the group text. A very rare orchid. But what was especially interesting were the other things that he found. So, for instance, this nice-looking bush up here is a type of bush that only grows in certain types of soils. So Thorsten was analyzing the soil pH, the different soil components, and this particular bush does not like to grow in soil that has a lot of calcium carbonate in it, which is what makes marble. But it does like to grow in soil that has a lot of schist underneath it. And so what Thorsten was able to document is that there is a clear line demarcating where the underlying rock of the quarry shifted from marble to schist based on the presence of this bush. So this, for instance, helped us understand the boundaries of the quarry, because they're not going to be doing quarry work when there's no marble underneath. He was also able to document how some of this extractive industrial production might have impacted the longer term ecological history of the area. So thinking about how ancient industrial practices have impacted the modern usages of these areas. We also did a lot of geochemical analysis. So this is Vasiliki and Evlavi doing our geochemical sampling. So she collected over 130 individual samples of marble in both of the quarries and has been analyzing them in her lab in Vienna. And what she's been able to demonstrate is the specific chemical signatures of the different types of marble. So the marble from Melanese chemically looks different than the marble from Apollonás. To the naked eye, these look absolutely identical. There's no way that you or I would ever be able to tell the difference between them. But when we look at them chemically, we can see a difference. And even more than that, through stable isotopic analysis, Vicky has been able to demonstrate not just which quarry something came from, but where in the quarry it might have come from, which is really revolutionary and really exciting, because now this means that we can go to a museum, we can go to an archaeological site and take a sample from a monument there, from a piece of sculpture, for instance, and we could trace its origins. We could tell the whole object biography of something from where it started in the side of a mountain to where it has ended up. So this is a really exciting thing about our research as well. We also, pair this with general architectural and sculptural survey. So looking at those abandoned statues that I showed you earlier, looking at some of the other abandoned blocks and thinking about why they might have been abandoned, what were they intended to be used for, what are they doing now. So we're looking again at those traces of process. How are they being extracted? How are they being shaped? How are they being transported? Because these are really heavy blocks. So another thing we have to think about is how do you get them out of the quarry on the mountainside, down to the ships, down to the harbor, down to wherever it is you actually want to take them. That's also a really complicated process. And we approach things like the study of sculpture, the study of architecture, in the same way we approach everything else, through a really interdisciplinary approach. So on the left side here, you see one of our project co-directors, Rebecca Levitin, documenting this abandoned statue. So she's employing a really three-pronged approach here. She's looking at it, doing on-site autopsy of the sculpture in person. She's sketching it. She's measuring it by hand. She's drawing it by hand. But she's also using a camera or an iPad Pro to create this photogrammetric model. So this is a model that you can then manipulate digitally through 3D software. You can measure off of it to double check your own measurements. It's basically a tool that allows us to three-dimensionally manipulate this object in space and to study it when we're not on the island. And so this, again, is going to allow Rebecca to get a much more holistic interpretation of this particular abandoned sculpture. Over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you also see how we're studying the inscription, so the epigraphic evidence. So we have these, what we call rupestral inscriptions. So these are not official documents. These are not inscribed state proclamations. This is just a normal person scratching something into the side of the mountain. So here's another place where we can see these traces, these little pieces of the actual people involved. Now, the results of all of this have allowed us to create some really detailed maps, the most detailed and most comprehensive maps of these two quarries yet to date, where we're documenting not only all of these ancient elements, but also the modern ones as well, such as lime kilns, where a lot of this material is being reused in later periods. In summer 2025, so just this past summer, we tackled our biggest challenge yet. And by that, I mean this block right here. So this is an abandoned block in the middle of the Milanese quarry. It weighs close to 25 tons. It is definitely architectural. We know that it was en route. It was being transported somewhere. But it was largely unknown. Most of the people living on the island had no idea what it was. The farmer who owns this pasturage had no idea what it was or even where it was. So we really wanted to tackle this and try and figure out what's going on. So here again, we used our traditional methodologies. Here we are measuring it by hand as best as we can for a 7.5 meter long block. But we also employed photogrammetry here too to help us understand what it might have looked like. We figured out where in the quarry it probably came from. So we found an extraction site that has a stretch of marble bedrock, almost the exact same dimensions as this block, so we know exactly where it came from. We've extrapolated its likely route, so where it was going when it was just abandoned. And so then the question, of course, is why was it abandoned, and where was it going? The most likely contender for this is this really stunning sanctuary with an unfinished marble temple from the same period of when the quarries were being exploited. So our assumption is that this beautiful giant block most likely served as a threshold, so a door threshold for not this door already has a threshold, the other door of the temple. And so through that, we then started to explore this Palatia Islet, which is just offshore from the main town of Naxos. And to talk a little bit more about how we explored this, what we did, I'm going to turn it over to Maya again.
So as students, we were full participants in all aspects of the project, which I think was really rewarding, and it was also really unique because I've had other field school experiences where, there were kind of limits on what we as students could do. So I'm kind of really grateful that NQP kind of allowed us to explore a bunch of different areas. So we did technical drawing, we did photogrammetry, we scanned things, we created maps, we used GIS, we did illustrations, digital illustrations. So maps and illustrations by us were made for future publications, which is really exciting. And yeah, I mean, these are some pictures of us doing the field work, but it was a really great experience. We also did archival research as well. So yeah, and
you got to fly the project drone.
yes, and that was very fun.
And so the other student member from William and Mary who participated is Devin Cassie, who is in the joint degree program at St. Andrews. And he's in St. Andrews right now, but sent in this nice video. Let's see if it plays.
Hi, my name is Devin Cassie, and I was fortunate to work on the Naxos Quarry project with Professor Pega, Maya, and the rest of the NQP team. With the NQP, I learned from senior members on the team about how QGIS and other digital tools and software could be applied in field documentation and analysis. Since the portrait has been extensively altered and repurposed over the past 2,500 years, my job was to mark which blocks had been disturbed, which blocks were in situ, and where other features on the island, like vegetation and modern walkways, were in relation to the temple. Senior members on the team also introduced me to the usage of photogrammetry in the field and the process behind developing orthophotos and 3D models. With Professor Pega's guidance, Maya and I also worked on digitizing records and articles from the archives at the American School of Classical Studies and the German Archaeological School in Athens. Learning about and applying digital tools like QGIS while working with the NQP reinforced the importance of these tools in archaeological research and how they contribute to developing a more holistic understanding of complex ancient sites. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that our work from the summer kind of extended outside of the summer. And so Devin and we made a poster for a national conference this January, and we won first runner-up for that, which was really exciting. Thank you. But so yeah, our work continues, and so right now I'm working on building out like a website for NQP, but we have a splash page up right now, so you can go ahead and scan that QR code. But yeah, overall, like from a student perspective, this was really great. I mean, I got to learn a bunch of new skills that I can employ in my future research, and to be honest, being able to do NQP is kind of what has led me to kind of explore an honors thesis track and stuff like that. So it's been really great.
Definitely check out the splash page that Maya created because it also has some links to our publications that are already out. It will be updated as more and more publications come out, and she's working on building up the full website as well. So there'll be lots more to explore here. And we have the QR code up again on a later slide. A couple of things to think about is, where do we go from here? We accomplished a lot last summer, and we are putting into place our plans for this upcoming summer. And so one of the chief things we want to do is fully document this temple. This is a temple that has been known for over 2,000 years. Visitors to the island in the 15th century talked about it. We have sketches and drawings of it from early travelers in Greece and really, really cool stuff. But it was never finished. It has never been fully excavated. It has never been fully published. There is still debate over who the temple was dedicated to, which Greek god was meant to be worshipped here. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. So one of the things that we want to do in this summer, perhaps another summer, it might be a 2-summer job, is document every single block of this temple in the same way that we did the giant block. So sketching it, measuring it, photographing it, creating a digital model for when it's relevant. We also are thinking about how to put this temple back together. So this is a really great digital reconstruction that was done for this particular standing door. So you can see that the middle of the threshold, the bottom block, was cut when it was converted into a church in the Byzantine period. So it's missing a chunk there. But our digital modeler was able to put it back in and give us a nice little door. And so we hope that by documenting all of the other blocks of the temple that are scattered around this island, and you can see here they are all over this little islet of the island, that we'll be able to have a better understanding of this unfinished temple. How far was it built up to at the time of its abandonment? What did the conversion to a church truly look at? This small islet has also seen habitation from the Neolithic period, industrial activity, of course, its use as a Greek sanctuary, a pagan sanctuary, as a Christian church. It was a staging ground during World War II. There's lots of different things happening here. So we also want to perform a diachronic holistic study. So really documenting every well, every cistern, every grave or burial, all of the different ways that this entire islet was used. And so you can see here, we got a good start on it. And this map on the left, this is the one that Devin mentioned. So using GIS to put in every single one of these blocks. So each one has its own GIS coordinates. And then color coding these ones in terms of what is in place, what has been moved, etc. So continuing that research, deepening that research. And the giant block that we found, it probably went right here. So it would have been that other doorway. So here again, there's that QR code. So from the splash page that Maya made, you can get our 2 publications that are out so far, both of which are open access. The other thing about NQP is we really want to democratize accessibility to our project, to our methodology, to our databases, to all of the things that we're doing. And so whenever possible, we're trying to make our publications open access. If you're really interested in the botanical study, the ecological study, Thorsten has an article coming out soon that will be all about that. We have more things under review, in process, things that the students have directly contributed to, where they will be receiving credit. Future publications might even feature them as co-authors. We really prioritize making this a project where everyone participates, everyone collaborates, because we each bring something different to that team. And so that's where we're going to end things right now. But you've got my email, Maya and Devin's emails. You can reach out to us. And now we have some time for Q&A from the audience as well.
When someone asks a question, if you could just repeat it for the video.
Absolutely. Who's feeling brave? Yes, Kate.
So it's amazing. You've got this international, multidisciplinary team. How did it come together? So are these your personal contacts, or you could sort of how did it start and plans that are going on?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So this started when the 2 co-directors, Rebecca Levitin of King's College London and Evan Levine from the University of Copenhagen, were still graduate students. And they were doing work on quarry landscapes, on small islands. Rebecca Levitin is a sculpture expert. And so this kind of evolved out of that. And then they have reached out to various experts in order to become members of the team. So Rebecca is a sculpture expert. Evan is a survey expert. So they needed someone who did architecture stuff. And so they asked me to come on board. We needed someone to do ceramic analysis. So we got another person on board. And so it sort of has evolved a little bit organically. Yeah. Yes, yeah. So I do know both of them personally, but they brought in other members of the team that I didn't know, members of the team that maybe one of them knew. And so we've kind of grown over time. But we do have representatives from 7 different countries. We work really closely with the Greek Archaeological Service. Vasiliki, our geochemical specialist, is from Naxos. She is a local Naxian, which is absolutely wonderful to have her as part of the team. And so we started the initial big push in 2024. So we did a proof of concept survey just for 1 week in February. And that was really successful, which prompted us to come back the next spring with another team, which was really great for Thurston, the botanist, because he was able to see what the flora kind of looks like in different seasons, right? And the way that might change things. And then we had our bigger team there this past summer, and hoping to be there again in a couple of months from now.
One more quick, and then I'll
Yeah.
Sorry, but Maya, I just question: were you and Devin the only students?
Yeah, so Devin and I weren't the only students. There were also 2 master's students from King's College who were Rebecca Leviton students, so our co-director. But yeah, so those were the others that were brought on as well.
You're the only 2 undergraduates.
Yeah, we were, yeah.
Fun, or?
Oh yeah, it was super fun, super interesting. I feel like I learned a lot from both our supervisors, so Professor Pega and everyone else, but also the other students as well. It was really great. I think I made some really good connections. Yeah.
Suzanne.
So this was just totally fascinating. Thank you so much to both of you. And I just have one question. I don't know if you can if you have answers to this, but I was trying to imagine hiking up those hills through that prickly stuff, carrying that marble thing. And I just wondered if do you all have any idea how they got these things up and down the hills?
Yeah, so that was an excellent question about transportation. So this is something that our team is really interested in as well, because some of these areas, so Epolonas is quite close to the coast. You can see the water right from there. With a good push, things would be down in the harbor. Milanese is more inland. It's more secluded. And so one of the things that we did on our initial proof of concept, on our pedestrian survey, was look for traces of what we call slipways. So slipways are roads or paths made up of the debris, the debitage of the quarrying process. So when you're quarrying something out of the side of the mountain, you're using chisels, you're using hammers, and little flakes, little flecks of marble or limestone are going to be shaved off in the process. All of that gets swept up and laid out to create a path. And so we have these almost sort of like primitive roads, we might think of them with the slipways, that are made of this debris. And so we can trace places where we have that debris. So you can see the dotted line is where we have some traces of this slipway, and the giant monolithic block itself, underneath it, is evidence of slipway, is these little pieces of quarrying debitage that we can see. Yeah, so they are dragging these. They're also putting them on log rollers. We know that in some places, in Athens, we have really good evidence that they are dragging blocks out of the quarry, putting them onto giant wooden carts, and then the carts are being used for transport on a sort of like a paved cobblestone road. Right.
And can I ask one more question? Why do they, or maybe they didn't always do this, but why would you, find yourself on some isolated hilltop and spend ages and ages carving a statue in order to transport your statue and break it in the process, rather than just take the marble to the place where the sculptor is or where the sculpture is going to be displayed? It seems so weird.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So that's part of this general process that we've been looking into. And we know from Naxos, we know from lots of other ancient quarries in Greece, in Italy, in Turkey, that what they tended to do was a rough shaping of the block in the quarry. So if we go back to this, for instance, so you can see from this particular statue that its arms are still connected. Its body anatomy is very roughed out. It has no facial features. The hair isn't articulated. It's rough quarrying. So we know that this happened in the quarry. They roughed out the general shape of it to make sure there weren't any defects in the block, right? Then you would transport it, and it has what we call a skin or buffer on it. So once it gets to its final location, that thin skin or buffer would be removed in order to give it its final details. And that's, for instance, when you would carve the eyes, when you would indicate the musculature to a greater degree. And the same thing happened with architectural blocks as well. They also have this skin or buffer so that if they get bumped during transport, it's not the end of the world. Now, this breakage is not something that we can fix, which is why it was just left there. But if it's a little bump or something like that, we assume that it can be fixed once we get it to site.
And what's the buffer made out of?
Is just this the marble, is just the stone itself.
They need a little bit, there's a little bit extra.
Yeah.
so they can scrape it off.
Exactly.
And underneath, is it all white, or do they have to make it white?
No, so this grayish color of this marble, this is just because it's been out exposed to the elements for 2,500 years. Yeah, but Naxian marble is a very vibrant white color. It's really micaceous. It really catches the sunlight and glistens and glimmers. But when it's been exposed to the elements and acid rain and things like that for so long, it weathers into this color. But the reason to do even a rough shaping in the quarry is because any little bit of the stone you remove lessens the weight, which makes it easier to transport, which makes it more cost effective. So they're not going to do the full scale carving in the quarry because we might bump the nose or something like that, but we're going to do a roughed out carving and then transport it and then finish it. And it's the same with the giant guy.
Yeah, the giant guy is about the size of like a school bus.
Yeah, there he is. It looks like
Yeah.
he's got a little bed around him.
Yeah, so that's his quarry. He is in the place that he was being quarried out of. So all around him, we have traces of the quarrying. I have an extra slide in here. Let's see. So this gives you a nice sense of scale. Already in the 1830s, they were really interested in this guy. So all around him are quarry marks, are tool marks, are traces of the process. So they were actively trying to get him out. And it's actually still unknown today if his back is fully detached or if he's still locked into the side of the mountain.
When they quarried, they were literally quarrying in the shape of the statue.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Is that usually what they did? I'm sorry, I'll stop.
No, so that's a great question. What are typical practices? And we know that it definitely varied from quarry to quarry because different types of marble are going to require different types of finesse, different types of tools. We know also that every quarry had a mixture of workers who were skilled and who were unskilled. So there was, a job for pretty much any skill level here. But they're mostly starting with big rectangles. So this would have started by tracing out with graphite on the stone, a rectangle of the size that they need it to be. And then they slowly start extracting around it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Raiden.
So you guys were talking about viewing this physical evidence of quarrying and the work that was done there. Have you guys been able to see through physical evidence a change in quarrying strategies over that period of time? Like, was it consistent, or was there an evolution in how these workers worked this stone?
Yeah, so the question was about if we see traces for changes in quarrying techniques over time. And the short answer to that is no. They seem to be using all of the methods available to them at all periods. And in both of the quarries, we saw at Melanès and Apollonas the exact same quarrying traces. So they're going about things the same way. They're definitely communicating with each other. We have two massive quarries in use at the same time on the same island. So you might have people who lived closer to one versus the other, and so that dictated where you might work. But they're all talking to each other. They're all using the same sorts of tools. And so we don't really see chronological changes with that. We do know that in much later periods, once we move into the 5th century, the 4th century, not on Naxos, but in other quarries, we do start to see traces of different types of techniques and tools. So we start to see the use of the running drill, so a sort of winch-powered drill. So we know that they're using that. The means of getting the blocks out of the quarry change a little bit once we have a little bit more advances in pulley systems. They do know about pulleys. They're using pulleys already, but the pulley mechanics are going to improve over time. Once we get to the modern period, they're still using a lot of really similar things. So one of the things when the team went to the modern quarry was to help us get a sense of how to differentiate between modern quarrying traces and ancient quarrying traces. Sometimes it's very, very clear, and other times it's more difficult to see because fundamentally it looks very similar.
I have a question mostly
So can you tell us more about your honors thesis and also afterward if you're planning after William Mary to continue in this field of research? Yeah, definitely. So I guess the question was just about my future trajectory and kind of how this inspired my honors thesis work and stuff like that. So coming to when I knew that I was going to come to Naxos, I had kind of a very specific interest in the kind of experience, the lived experience of the quarry workers, so the people that were doing the work in these quarries. So it was really exciting for me to kind of go and see the tool marks and see kind of evidence of their ritual practice. I think that was actually one of the most kind of exciting things for me, was that there's evidence on the island for who these workers worshipped. Very kind of specific gods to two giants called Otis and Ephialtes, who were known in mythology for moving stone. Which is really, I mean, like, it's really incredible because, you know, you can kind of get the sense of identity there, you know, the sense of kind of affinity, like these people relating, you know? And so when I was thinking about my honors thesis, I kind of wanted to extend that to more mediums. So right now I'm really curious about, you know, what were the ritual practices of potters, or what were the ritual practices of, you know, other sculptors or woodworkers or things like that. Because, you know, ultimately it's people that are at the heart of this process. And we don't get a lot of evidence for them because, as Professor Pega was saying, you know, they're not in the written record. So, you know, how do we get a sense of their identity, really? And so that's kind of what I'm looking at for my honors thesis, which is really exciting. But yeah, in the future, I definitely think that I want to go to grad school for Mediterranean archaeology. So.
Nolan?
I guess just to follow up on that last question a little bit, how much do we know about the people who worked in the quarry? Were they enslaved or free? Did they come from Naxos, or were they brought in from other city-states? Like, what did the population who created these sites look like?
That's a really good question, and the answer is that we don't really know. I think that the question of skilled versus enslaved, like skilled and enslaved labor, there's so many different things that kind of overlap that complicate how we view this. So it's a little bit hard to tell, because, you know, we're seeing things being roughed out in the quarries, right? And we kind of assume that, you know, maybe this is the work of an artist, but what if this is the work of a quarry worker? Like, how are we kind of placing these labels? So that's a really good question, and I don't know the answer, and I hope to get a little bit more insight into that. I think, do you have any?
Check back in 1 year with Maya.
Yes.
I mean, the other part of this is that, yeah, the terminology, right? Are these laborers? Are they stone workers? Are they artisans or artists? Each label carries with it different types of assumptions and different types of baggage. And so depending on how we talk about these people in English depends on how we interpret them. Now, we know that in metal mines, for instance, silver mines, things like that, a lot of enslaved labor was used, but not all of it was enslaved labor. In quarries in Athens, for instance, we know that there is some enslaved labor and some non-enslaved labor, but it doesn't map onto the skilled versus unskilled. So for instance, a lot of the skilled quarrying work was done by enslaved individuals, and a lot of the unskilled quarrying work was done by free individuals. But that's just one quarry, and it's hard to extrapolate from one quarry to the broader system. But I brought our maps up again here because one of the sites that is well known in the Milanese quarry is right over here, the so-called Sanctuary of the Source, which is where we have evidence for this ritual practice that Maya was talking about. It definitely seems to be a workshop area. So it's a place where we find unfinished, smaller pieces of sculpture, so things that you could just like pick up and bring with you. And so that's, you know, one of the places probably I think that Maya is going to look at this summer.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, sorry.
I had a question about like the geochemical analysis. So I was curious, how specific is it? Like how
Absolutely. So the question was about the geochemical testing. How is it done? How much of it do we do? So we do have a database. So there is a general database of Mediterranean marble, to which Vasiliki has been adding a lot of this data that we're getting out of Naxos. So we are plugging our data into a much bigger database that stretches all over the Aegean and Mediterranean. And so, she took 136 samples. That's quite a lot of sampling to do. She's still running some of them. And I don't really understand this graphic here that she produced, but it does show us that through the isotopic analysis, so looking at the chemical isotopes, where things are from, the blue circle is Apollonase, the red one is Melanese, and you can see there is a little bit of overlap there, but it is enough to distinguish them. And so when we have permission, we might sample a statue or a piece of architecture or something like that. This is a destructive process, which is why it's always done in consultation with archaeologists, with the local archaeological survey. It's always done in as unobtrusive way as possible. When we're out in the middle of the quarries, we don't have to be quite so careful, but we're always documenting exactly where the samples are taken from. So that we have really precise data about where these samples are coming from. And Vicky is running all sorts of different analyses with this. So it's not just the isotopic analysis, but she's also doing additional testing because it's been shown that the isotopic analysis is not enough to give us as precise a pinpoint as we would like. So for instance, there's a couple different types of marbles in the Aegean where their chemical signature looks identical. And they're from hundreds of miles apart. They're from different metamorphic ranges. So it's not enough to simply run the one type of geochemical analysis. You have to pair it with other types of analyses.
Yeah, so, the project is impressive in so very many ways, and including, the different people from different places with different kinds of expertise who have to come together. My question is a little bit beyond the project in the sense that what is the economy that lifts up Naxos right now, and what was it like to engage with people there while you were there? Because this is like a lot of presence and a lot of work you're doing in a place that's not where you're from.
That's a really great question about the way that NQP interacts with the local Naxian economy, the way we interact with the people of Naxos. So we have a Naxian on our team, which has been a tremendous advantage to us and has been so wonderful because it means that we don't only have her on her team, we have her entire extended family that we're plugged into this really warm and wonderful group of people on Naxos. But it also means that if we run into a problem, if we have a question about something, we have sources that we can reach out to really think about what's going on. So for instance, there is nearby the giant monolith, there's another abandoned architectural block known as the Queen's Chest. And so one of the other things that we've done is sort of an ethnographic deep dive, interviewing local people in the area to figure out the lore behind this abandoned block, which is really interesting and really fun. And occasionally in the scholarship, the Queen's Chest gets applied to the monolith, even though it's very clear that these are two totally separate things. But so we've been thinking also about this lived experience. When we visited the modern marble quarry, we talked to the owner to really get some insight into how they process the marble now, what that looks like. We're hoping to do something similar with the emery mines. They're on a completely opposite side of the island from where we've been working, which is why we haven't engaged with them as yet, but that would be another interesting thing for us to think about. But in general, whenever we are on Naxos, we, of course, adhere to all of the local customs, to all of the local rules and guidelines. We are there not to be invasive. We're there to study and to illuminate the past of this island. Our future plans also involve working with the local town of the Naxos town, which you see right there, to create new didactic signs for all of the different archaeological sites, including the Portara site, to help them design new footpaths. There was recently a really unfortunate incident of a tourist going up next to the Portara, picking up a block of marble on the ground, holding it above his head very triumphantly and problematically. Helping to design new literature, new fences, new walking paths to encourage certain types of behavior and discourage other types of behavior. We also hope, once we've completed our study of the Palatia Islet, to create didactic school materials for K through 8 education on the island. We want to host a community day where we talk about our experiences there, and have the mayor give a talk, have other people from Naxos give talks, and really think about how we can bridge the past with the present on the island. I know that some people might need to run off for classes, for meetings, for things like that. Maya and I are happy to stick around for more questions as they come up. You also have our email addresses here, so you can reach out to us. But please make sure you get yourself some lunch. Make sure you check out our beautiful poster. And thank you so much for coming to talk to us.